Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. It is a distinct honor to speak at this amazing event. And to the event organizers, thank you so much for inviting me. So, as you can see here on the screen, the title of my talk today is The IoT of the Future, or the Internet of Things, from a theoretical concept to a major priority for many companies. Like with artificial intelligence and machine learning, the Internet of Things is also the victim, if you would, of a lot of hype. So, how does this apply to you on this call or on this webinar listening to me? And how does this apply to your company if you are a consultant or a vendor to your customers? But just a brief description, what I want to cover in this 20-minute long call, which is really not a lot of time for this massive topic, is firstly, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself and about my social media profile and my website and where you can go to follow the work that I'm doing. I want to briefly touch on the Internet of Things from a historical perspective, but then also look at the future, what is new. I then want to talk about the fact that the Internet of Things or smart devices is everywhere, if you don't already know that. Then I really want to peer into the future. What can we expect in the next few years? And then I want to just conclude this talk and then open it for questions and answers. And I really want to encourage you to post your questions in the chat box provided. There are no stupid questions. You'd be surprised how many times me and I guess other speakers here will not always know the answers, but that's how we learn together. No one who's speaking here is in supreme authority on any topic. Yes, we've learned a lot through our work and our experience and our studies and our learning, but it's only by pondering questions, especially around ethics and the future of our children when it comes to this technology, that we really will learn together. So there are no stupid questions. And I really want to try to get to all the questions in the time allowed toward the end. So yeah, at the start, just a little bit about me. My name is Johan Stein. I am based here in Johannesburg in South Africa, but I work for PwC as the architect of smart automation here in the local market, but I don't speak on behalf of the firm. I do, however, speak on behalf of the IIT which is the Institute of Information Technology Professionals of South Africa, and my social media. So there you can also see my website. It's aiforbusiness.net. There you will find my LinkedIn and my Twitter accounts. You'll also find my YouTube account and also my email address. So please follow me and look out for some of the exciting things that we publish and some of the exciting webinars that we are hosting. Lastly, is a little bit about me. I write very often. In the last 5 months, I've produced 35 articles for well-known local publications like the Business Day newspaper. It's a daily newspaper, the largest in our local market. And every Wednesday, I publish a thought leadership piece. But I also publish for other publications like FinWeek, IT Web Brainstorm, and News24, and others that you can see on the screen here. And then I also have a podcast channel on Spotify and on Amazon's website, Google, and the others. So again, when you go to aiforbusiness.net and you click on the podcast icon, you can follow me, hopefully on the platform of your choice. So I really look forward to interact with you, to get your emails, to connect with you on LinkedIn, and to hear what you think about the articles that I'm publishing and also about the podcasts. Would love to learn from you and to get your feedback. Firstly, I want to, just from a historical point of view, tell you a bit of a personal story. My father worked for the local railways organization, which is now called Transnet. And they had this center in a place called Central Rand, which is where they had, similar to the picture you see on the screen, all these big monitors, and they had all these kind of old mainframe computers. And when I was 6 or 7 years old, my father took me there one day, and I was amazed with all these blinking lights and all these screens. And he explained to me how they could track every train that comes into the greater Johannesburg area. And it was sometimes freight trains or passenger trains. They could see where every train was going. And this big yard was almost like a distribution yard of sorts. So they control the various trains coming into the area. But the interesting thing was that they already back then, and now I'm talking about around about 1981, 1982, so a long time ago, they could already, through sensors on the railway tracks, determine where the various trains were. And if a train was traveling on the wrong track or traveling at a speed that was determined too fast, the sensors would pick it up and send this information to this central control room so that humans can make decisions and either stop the train or slow it down or divert it onto another track. So the idea of sensors sending us information is definitely not new in the fields of agriculture, security, and many others. For many years, if not many decades, we've had the ability for sensors to send us information, but it was always up to a human being or a team of human beings to make decisions with what to do with that information. And now, if we look into the future, the human in the loop and human decision making is really where the big difference comes in. So, as we look into the future, what is new? As many of you will know, firstly, we have a lot more amazing processing power. CPUs became what they call GPUs, but even in your cell phone, the computing power is a lot better than was in a mainframe computer not many years ago. Secondly, the advent of cloud computing gives us all, large or small organizations, the ability to access incredible processing power, to look at what these sensors are sending us and to make sense of it. Thirdly, obviously, the advent of smart technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the way we can look at patterns through the information that these sensors are sending us. And then next is almost autonomous decision making. And here you can see a picture of a decision tree. But one of the big changes from the past is that years ago, these sensors were somewhat dumb. It could sense weather patterns, for instance, or in the example I used earlier, it can sense where a train is on the track. But it always took a human or a team of humans to make that decision. We are getting more and more to a world of autonomy or autonomous automation or autonomous decision making. And what we can find now these days, and some refer to it as edge computing, is where in the various devices or sensors, there's so much more computing power that the device does not necessarily have to rely on a mainframe or on the cloud to understand the information that it's receiving. So it can make decisions by itself. But we also, the big difference between now and some years ago is that these sensors can communicate to each other. So if a train is coming down the track and we need to stop it, and the sensor that's picking up the speed of the train sees that the train is moving too fast, it doesn't have to send a signal and hope the human will stop the train in time. It sends a signal to the sensor that actually stops the train. Now think of this application in, as I mentioned earlier, agriculture, or in business or in security. So if somebody walks into a building, and here we can talk about facial recognition, which is quite a contentious issue because there are so much still inaccuracies and biases built into it. But if we recognize that the face of the person entering our building is not authorized or it's not recognized, then we can already have the sensor kick off a security alert to the security team, or potentially ask the sensors on the doors not to open it, to keep it locked, so not let the person further into the building unless we've or until we've identified his or her identity. So think of a high value customer entering a bank branch, and not that we go to the bank that much anymore, given the COVID pandemic and online banking. But if you were a person walking into a bank and the facial recognition picks up that you are a very important and a high value customer, then it can already kick off autonomously certain processes. It can, for instance, alert the bank manager or his or her assistant to welcome this person. Based on previous interactions, you know this person loves tea or coffee or a cappuccino, and you can get the machine to already start making that beverage. And these are some silly examples, but think of the business and the societal applications of these devices that are a lot smarter now than they were many years ago. Next, I want to talk about the fact that the Internet of Things, or IoT, is everywhere. It has already infiltrated our lives. And firstly, I want to talk about consumer IoT. Think of our homes. Now, I've got smart speakers. I've got a Google Home speaker that connects to my Kittle, to my TV, to my security system. But a lot of homes these days are connected to the internet through smart devices. So you could regulate the temperature or the humidity in your home. You can let these sensors pick up when somebody walks in, that it, for instance, switches on the lights, switches on the music, and so forth. There are some amazing applications in our homes when it comes to IoT, but really the big money and the big application, or the bigger application, lies with commercial IoT, where telematics helps commercial industries such as transportation to improve things like fleet management. Think of IoT in healthcare, for instance. And again, whether we had pacemakers connected to the internet, regulating somebody's heartbeat, or sensors in the rest of our body, this is not new, but these devices are becoming smaller and a lot more powerful. So the societal impact when it comes to healthcare could be incredible when it comes to commercial IoT. We also speak about infrastructure IoT. So think about IoT devices in your building. I've already referenced security, but things like if you think of your meeting rooms, and these days more and more of us are gradually going back to the office, and over the next few months, we will most likely return either on a hybrid basis or completely back to the office. But if you have a heat sensor, for instance, in a meeting room, and you also have a sensor that can determine how many people are in the meeting room, and you can look at the medium temperature, then you can pick up whether if the average temperature in the room is higher than normal, it might indicate that one or two of the people have fever or are getting sick or having some sort of COVID symptoms. And then you can autonomously kick off a process by having somebody come to the room, maybe do a COVID test or a temperature test on everybody. But also think of just regulating meeting rooms. I mean, how many times in the good old days of going to the office and booking meeting rooms, especially if you work for a big company, the pain of finding a meeting room. You'll book a room for the 5 people you want to invite. You can't find a room, but then you find one room available that can accommodate 12 people. That is a waste. So you can always look at how can you smartly automate through these smart sensors the kind of facilities you need in the building where you work, and also to regulate it through as I said, the temperature, the amount of people in the room, and so forth. And then largely, which is also quite big, is what we call industrial IoT. And here we look at big manufacturers. If you think of mining and resources, for instance, think of self-driving cars down under in the mines. Think of the amount of human lives that we can save because we don't always have to expose humans to these dangerous environments. think of the efficiencies, and remember that these autonomous vehicles and autonomous devices can work 24/7. They don't strike, they're not unionized, they don't demand a raise, they don't demand higher salary. On the other side, however, we have to think of what do we do regarding job displacements as we smartly automate and as we smartly use self-driving cars or the Internet of Things. We can't just get rid of people. We have to think of how do we actually enable people and educate them to use their talents and their strengths for something more than just autonomous tasks and for just reporting and things like that. We often have very talented people in our businesses who are not recognized. So change management and upskilling is an important topic. It's not just about technology and platforms. So when we look at IoT into the future, there's just a number of things I want to touch on before I conclude. Firstly, there is a massive explosion of devices. There are currently more than 4.7 billion objects connected to the internet. It's expected that in the next year, it will reach almost 12 billion devices, and by 2025, 21 billion devices connected to the internet. So there will be an absolute explosion of this technology because these devices are becoming smarter, but they also become cheaper to produce and to implement. Next, we look at smart cities. More cities will be connected to the internet. Think of regulating your traffic, think of security, think of visitor kiosks, think of video cameras regulating where people move, think of bike rental stations and taxis and many other things. If you Google and read up on smart cities, then the future really is interesting, but it's all essentially embedded in this idea of IoT devices becoming a lot more prevalent, a lot more democratized, and a lot smarter and cheaper to produce. And then obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's so the big thing about all this data that we're getting from these billions of devices is what do we do with all that data? What do we do with all these signals coming our way? There's no way that humans or a human team will be able to assess and make sense of all this data. And that's really where this convergence of AI and machine learning and other technologies connects with smart devices. So think of if you are running an airport or a train station, for instance, and you've got signals coming in from all the security cameras, all the heat sensors, everyone scanning their cards, and most likely an iteration of 20 or 30 other data sources. To form and understand the patterns and to make decisions around those patterns will take machine learning. So, to a large extent, the growth of these devices and their use for us relies on cloud computing, which I already spoke about, which relies on smarter processing power, which I already touched on, but it also relies on this smart technology era where we can faster discover patterns and autonomously kick off processes. What we will also see is that these devices, even though they are already a lot smarter than years ago, again, if we think of edge computing, the actual processing power in every one of these devices will increase immensely over the next few years. Again, referencing your cell phone, a lot more powerful than the computer on the spaceship that sent men to the moon in the late 60s, or even smarter than a computer and a really powerful computer just a few years ago. So imagine the computing power from a miniature point of view that we can put in these devices to understand what they're seeing or sensing or smelling or hearing and to make decisions by themselves. And then, of course, 5G networks. And as many of you know, 5G gives us the ability through the cell phone towers to actually, at a much higher speed and a lot more data, to be able to understand what all these devices are sending us, but also for us to send a lot more data to these devices to execute certain actions, close security Gates, and whatever the example could be. So if you think of all the things I've just mentioned, think about how the advent of smart technology, AI, 5G, smarter devices, cheaper, smaller devices, it's almost like the potential and the opportunities are unlimited. And we are definitely in for an interesting time about where this technology will take us. And then, of course, all of this exciting stuff talks about security and regulation, especially when we think about implants into our bodies that can manage our health, the way our bodies are regulated, and so forth. We don't want it to be hacked. We'd want it to be regulated. Look, it's one thing if your bank account is hacked and it takes 3 days to sort it out. But if you have a life-threatening disease and you have machines that take decisions or information from sensors, you certainly want that machine to be secure and to be accurate. Think of a loved one, think of a child that's sick in hospital, and what the impact of hacking or just incorrect coding can do for their health. So when it comes to privacy, like POPIA, which we have here in South Africa, or GDPR in Europe, or privacy regulations across the world, the way we harvest and process this data from consumers or businesses and the way we protect that data is of incredible importance. It's not just the tech is incredible. What we do with that data in a secure and a responsible and an ethical way is even more important. So let's not almost lighten this topic. Let's not think it's not that important. Privacy, the protection of information, the protection of people with life-threatening situations using these devices. This is important. You know, the philosophy, the ethics, and the future of this technology for us and for our children should never be underestimated. That is really the slides. And again, in 20 minutes, I can really just scratch the surface. But just a few takeaways. Think of where this technology was. Think of through the advent of cloud computing, smarter processing power, and the likes of AI and machine learning, where this technology is now and where it will be going. Think of the actual practical applications. Think of ethics and privacy. Think about the societal impacts around healthcare and education. And always, as I always say when I do these talks, think about the future of our children. And again, if you want to connect with me, go to aiforbusiness.net. I would love to hear from you. And right now, I would love to attend in the time that's left to some of your questions and comments. Thank you for listening in, and I look forward to collaborating with you into the future.